Rabbi, I'm surprised at you. You know we don't eat until we light the menorah. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you a whole bunch of Hanukkah picture books that our family loves, that your family will love, whether you're Jewish or Gentiles. Just like I've been encouraging you all year to read diverse books to your kids, well, please, this time of year when Christian supremacy is at its highest, read books about kids who don't celebrate Christmas. Read books about Hanukkah. I think it's a great thing to do. A lot of Gentile liberals I have found are surprised to find that anti-Semitism is alive and well in America. You know, when I was a kid, I was constantly asked from the time I can remember, does your family eat babies? Well, maybe not constantly, but like a couple times a year I'd get asked, does your family eat babies? Why did you kill Jesus? You're a dirty Jew. This was just regular stuff that I picked up at school. It sucked. And your kids are going to be exposed to that too, good Gentile liberals. Like your kids are going to be picking up anti-Semitic messaging from the kids of, fascist anti-Semitic parents who are out there, who are living in your neighborhood. So you can really help us out and be a better ally to the Jewish community by reading your kids some books at Hanukkah time, some Hanukkah books. These books are all really fun. I think you'll find some that your family will love. And it's another way that you can read diverse books. So for each of these books, I'm going to tell you both about the story and how fun it is and also how religious it is. We are personally a secular Jewish family. We're not actually very religious. We're not teaching our kids to pray to God or anything, but we are practicing Jewish traditions. So that's something that I get uncomfortable when a book is too religious. And so I'll mention that as well, how secular or religious is each book. And because these are our favorites, most of these books are pretty secular and they're just sort of celebrating the traditions, Yiddish, things like that. So first, let's just actually get the story of Hanukkah out of the way with The Story of Hanukkah by David A. Adler. Illustrated by, the stickers covering it, by Jill Weber. If you're a Jewish family and you just want to make sure that your kid knows the tradition, or if you're a Gentile family and maybe you're not even sure why we celebrate Hanukkah, this goes into the story of the fight between the Maccabees and religious persecution at the hands of the Greek God-worshipping king Antiochus. The Maccabees resisted. They were successful. They reclaimed their temple in Jerusalem, which had been trashed. And then, finding only enough oil for one night to light the sort of holy flame that was supposed to be always burning, the oil magically lasted 8 days. That's why we celebrate Hanukkah. So this is just a straightforward telling of that story. The illustrations are bright and colorful. It is, a violent story, and so there is mention of violence. It shows, the characters pictured with swords and weapons. If that's something that makes you uncomfortable for very young children, you may wait until your kid's a little bit older to read this book. But as a parent of a Jewish 3-year-old, I think that it's fine. There's no blood or gore or anything. This is the go-to to learn the story of Hanukkah, which is kind of a jumping off point then for all these other books, which are maybe a lot more fun, that are talking more about the traditions and the history and spoofing on the story of Hanukkah. This isn't a library book. This is our personal copy, is Hanukkah Bear. And it's by Eric A. Kimmel, illustrated by Mike Wanutka. So Hanukkah Bear is a very cute story about Baba Brena, who doesn't see very well anymore, but she still makes the best latkes in the village. And she's getting ready for the rabbi and all of her friends to come over. When who arrives at her door but Old Bear? But Baba Brena's eyesight is so bad, she mistakes Old Bear for the rabbi and tries taking off his fur coat. Well, it's a very silly story, and you get to make lots of bear growl noises, right? Old Bear followed his nose to the oven. Roar, roar. Rabbi, I'm surprised at you. You know we don't eat until we light the menorah. So Baba Brena and the bear have a great time celebrating Hanukkah. They play dreidel, they eat latkes, and then Old Bear gets sleepy, and she gives him a present and sends him home. And finally, the real rabbi shows up, and the whole sort of plot is revealed. That Baba Brena figures out that she has mistaken a bear for the rabbi. And she's a very silly Baba Braina. There's also a Latkes recipe in the back, and we did use this Latkes recipe last year, and it came out great. You know how I feel about books with recipes, and my daughter loves like using the recipe right from the book. And this is a good one. So if your family is not Jewish, if they're Jewish, you'll love this book. If your family's not Jewish, this could be a good book to read. It's not a very religious story. It's mostly secular. Latkes recipe in the back that you could try out if you've never made latkes before. They're very delicious. So that's Hanukkah Bear. The next one is a very cute take on Goodnight Moon. It's Goodnight Bubbla, a joyful parody by Cheryl Haft, illustrated by Jill Weber. This is a great book for learning some Yiddish. And again, I would encourage even non-Jews to learn a little bit of Yiddish. It also has a Latkes recipe in the back, so that's great as well. I haven't used this one, but I mean, latkes are not complicated. There's a glossary, a Yiddish-English glossary in the back, because there's actually quite a bit of Yiddish words in this book. So if you are not familiar with Yiddish, you may need to read and like practice the pronunciations before the first time you read this book to your kids. Because there's really a lot of Yiddish, even some words that I didn't know, like Shana Punim, which means pretty face. Like I did not know that one. I'll read a little bit of it to you. In the small blue room, there was a bubbla and a little shmata, and then oy vey came the whole mishpucha. And there were two little bubbies schlepping their hubbies. A kiss on the kepala. Such a shana punim. So you can see if you don't know any Yiddish going into this, you're gonna struggle if you don't kind of practice the Yiddish words ahead of time, because it is teaching you a lot of Yiddish. But I love that about it because I want my daughter to know those words. I grew up just kind of absorbing Yiddish from my grandmother. My grandmother has now passed on, so I'm really appreciative to have this book to sort of remind me to use some of those Yiddish words and phrases with my daughter. And in terms of religiousness, I don't think there's any religious content in this book like whatsoever. It's just about the fun of celebrating Hanukkah and your family and the Yiddish. So Goodnight Bubbla is one of my favorites. The next book is our funniest book. This is Meet the Latkes, and the first time I read this out loud, like my husband was in the room and he was like bursting out laughing, like dying laughing. This is one of the funniest kids books I've ever read, hands down. So Meet the Latkes. Meet the Latkes family. They're just like you and me, except they're potato pancakes. This family of potato pancakes, they celebrate Hanukkah, and then the grandpa, who insists that it's Hanukkah, he starts telling the story of Hanukkah, but he's gotten it kind of wrong. Instead of Maccabees, he's talking about how the Jews were Megabees, and they were fighting alien potatoes from planet So it's a very silly story. Meanwhile, as the grandpa is telling this like ridiculous tall tale about Hanukkah, the little dog Applesauce is correcting the grandfather and telling the real story of Hanukkah. So he's like, are you kidding me? The enemy wasn't a bunch of alien potatoes. It was a terrible king named Antiochus. You get the real story of Hanukkah through the dog Applesauce. But it's a very, very funny book. My daughter absolutely loves it. I mean, I like reading it because it's so funny and silly. And that's something I really love about a lot of these Jewish books, like contain a ton of Jewish humor and they're really lighthearted and fun. And I think that that's just great. There's another book by this author about Passover. This is a library book. I'm definitely going to be getting both Meet the Latkes and the Passover book that the author, Alan Silberberg, and I want to get this book and his, I think, Meet the Matzah, something about the matzah one for Passover, because he's just so funny. If your kids don't know the story of Hanukkah at all, like never heard it, and then this is the first book they hear about it, it may lead to some really ridiculous confusion, because the whole thing is that it's like, you know, incorrect story of Hanukkah. So if you're going to read this one and you're not Jewish and your kids don't know the story of Hanukkah, I would just make sure you pair it with like another book that clearly lays out the story of Hanukkah. The next one is a great book for blended families like mine. So this is Daddy Christmas and Hanukkah Mama. And I think it's a great book for any family just to show that there are families with religious diversity. And that's awesome. This is a more serious one. There's not really any funny elements to it. I'm a mix of two traditions from Daddy Christmas and Hanukkah Mama. And it's just kind of this girl explaining how she's celebrating what they cook and what they eat and stuff. There is one slightly like religious part. Uncle Zachary's talking about the miracle of the oil. Aunt Faith tells about the animals in the manger waiting for the baby to be born. Wide-eyed, we listen to these traditional tales which link us together today. I kind of like that because that's as a secular Jewish family, like that's how we think about these stories, as traditional tales. And this one has a recipe for cranberry kugel dressing, which I have not made and I'm a little skeptical of, frankly, but I'm willing to try it. I just haven't made it. So that's Daddy Christmas and Hanukkah Mama. So this is All of a Kind Family Hanukkah. I had never heard of the All of a Kind family books, and I feel like so cheated that I never had these as a kid. So these were a classic book series by Sydney Taylor, and I think that the originals were more like chapter books, where the illustrations were, you know, it was like mostly text and there was an illustration on sort of every other page. That was like a more old-fashioned way of writing children's books. They've been rewritten and re-illustrated. So this is written by Emily Jenkins, illustrated by Paul Ozolinsky. So they're taking these classic characters from this family, but they've made a more modern picture book. With more modern design. The picture dominates the whole page and there's less text per page, and that's going to appeal to kids who are used to these more, you know, full color, full spread picture books. So it's set in the 1910s. This is in 1912. So it's about a family of 5 girls. But basically, Gertie just really wants to help her family make the potato latkes. And they're all telling her she's too young. So she's too young to use the peeler. It's too sharp. She's too young to use the grater or the knife. She's too young to help with frying in the oil because all of that is dangerous. I mean, having a toddler, this is like, she's always like begging to help. And I'm like, no, it's too sharp. And she throws a little temper tantrum and has to go to her room and calm down. And then her dad comes in and is very sweet and funny and kind of coaxes her out from under the bed. And she can finally help with the most important event of Hanukkah night, which is lighting the menorah. And so she and her daddy light the menorah together. So it's a very sweet story, and my daughter loves it. The sort of old-timey, cozy feeling. The hygge of this book is really good. I would say there's no religious elements that would make anyone uncomfortable. There's a link to a latke recipe if you really need one. So you can, this is another great book to like read and then make some latkes so your kids can have a taste of that. I recommend having them with sour cream, but lots of kids like them with jam. The next book is another very funny one. This is 8 Wild Nights, a family Hanukkah tale by Brian B. Cleary, illustrated by David Udovic. This one starts with a quick description of, again, the story, why we celebrate Hanukkah. And then it gets into a poem, a rhyming poem that's a lot of fun to read. Little kids really respond to, rhyming, sing-songy stories. And it's just so funny. So it starts out with the family getting ready for company to come over. Then here comes their family stampeding. I love how lively the illustrations are. And there's a lot going on each page. So even though the poem may be kind of long, even for young readers, I think really young readers would respond to this book because there's just so many details in the picture and funny things happening. My favorite part is, again, that sort of like Jewish irreverence towards like our own religion. On this page, they're talking about Uncle Dave. He'll tell the whole table his Hanukkah fable. When I was a boy, he will say, our bathroom was low on the teepee, you know, enough for just maybe one day. My dad told me, Sonny, we won't have the money for a week and a day to buy more. But that small roll, it lasted. After 8 days had passed, it could paper the whole corridor. So kind of making fun of the miracle of the oil and turning it into like the miracle of toilet paper is just very funny and it's very Jewish. And I think this book is so funny. So that kind of gives you a taste of the sing-songy nature of the story. Love the art, love the poem. It's so funny. I guess my like only qualm about this in like a lot of the books is you've got a big Jewish family here, you know, and everyone's white. And in a lot of these books, all of the people are white. And obviously we know that the Jewish people are very diverse. There are Black Jews and Asian Jews and Latinx Jews and all kinds of Jews from all over the world. And unfortunately, that is something that I have found is a lot of the Hanukkah and a lot of Jewish books just in general have a problem with only presenting Jews as white Ashkenazi Jews. So that's something publishing and Jewish publishing in particular needs to work on. The next book is by Woody Guthrie, believe it or not, Hanukkah Hanukkah. So in the back, I didn't know this about Woody Guthrie. Oh, and this one came with a CD from our library. We don't actually have a CD player, so we haven't listened to it. But the Klezmatics have a recording of this. Woody Guthrie never recorded the song, I don't think, or if he did, I haven't been able to find it. But he wrote the lyrics and the Klezmatics have recorded it, and you can listen to it on YouTube or Spotify, iTunes, whatever you have. So at the back, there's a picture of Woody Guthrie and his wife and a little explanation that he married into a Jewish family and he was actually really close with his Jewish in-laws and saw a lot of parallels between the way Jews had been treated in America and the way the Okies had been treated during the Dust Bowl. And so he just really embraced Judaism and wrote several Hanukkah songs and songs for Jewish culture. If you are a singer and if you like to read books with songs and sing songs with your kids, this is great. I had to listen to the Klezmatic song like a couple of times to get the rhythm or the melody right. So I'll sing you a little bit of it. It's Hanukkah, Hanukkah, kissy my cheek. The light in my window, it burns for a week. I'll open my presents and take a little peek. It's Hanukkah, Hanukkah time. So I'm obviously not the best singer in the world, but I can muddle through and sing it with my kid, and she loves it. And it's got a really nice message, this song. If you've got no money, well, that's all right. It's Hanukkah, Hanukkah time. That line gets repeated twice. It's about sharing on Hanukkah and embracing family and having a good time and dancing, and you don't need a lot of money to have a good time on Hanukkah, which is a very like Woody Guthrie message. So I love this book and I love this song, and it's one of the better Hanukkah songs. A lot of Jewish holiday songs, unfortunately, are just like covers a lot of times of like other melodies and tunes with the lyrics replaced with Jewish ones, which is fine, but it's nice to have some really good music to celebrate Hanukkah with. The next book is Zig Zach, A Magical Hanukkah Night. And this is by Eric A. Kimmel, illustrated by John Goodell. This book is about two devils. This is another kind of set in the shtetl times in some Eastern European village. And so these devils fly down to the village of Brisk and they start making mischief on Hanukkah. And so they're turning the dreidels, and they say Zig Zach, and then all the dreidels sprout arms and legs and start dancing. Zig Zach, and the Latkes start flying around in the air. Zig Zag, and the candles on the menorah start exploding, and the musical instruments start playing all on their own. And so the people of Brisk run to the rabbi for help. And to their surprise, the rabbi is just like, ooh, floating latkes, yum. And ooh, isn't this nice that there's fireworks and there's music playing for us all by itself. And so to their surprise, he invites the devils over and thanks them for all the fun magic that they created on Hanukkah night. And he kind of tricks them into providing lots of gelt for the poor and the children in the village by sort of being like, are you magical enough to give us some gelt? And then the devils say, and then he says, I can break you from your chains. I can break you from being evil. And the devils say, no, we like being evil. And so he says, well, okay, then I gotta banish you. And they say, well, we're gonna take all our magical stuff with us, including all the money and the dreidels. But the rabbi won't cave, and so they turn into lions to try to scare him, and they turn into big monsters to try to scare him. And he ends up saying, I'm not scared of those things. The only thing I'm scared of is cockroaches. And then they turn themselves into cockroaches and he steps on them. And then they celebrate the most magical Hanukkah of all time. So this is a very beautifully illustrated book. Obviously, it's a magical, fun story. It may be a little, because of all the like devils and the rabbi fighting the devils, it may be a little bit more religious in a way that makes people uncomfortable, if that sort of isn't your deal. But I mean, we're secular, and I think it's still, I think it's a great story. I think it's a great fable. I love this book. And it's kind of fun, you know, this time of year, sometimes like all the books and movies and everything, they're so sappy and sentimental. And I don't know, it's like fun to have like devils and like kind of a monster book, like a scary book at Halloween, at Hanukkah time. So I think that that's kind of cool and unique about this book. Okay, the next book is Celebrate Hanukkah with Light, Latkes, and Dreidels. This is a National Geographic book. It's part of a series, Holidays Around the World. So this is the most informational. It's not a story, it's just informational about Hanukkah. My daughter finds it unfortunately very boring. The thing that I really like about it though is that it has pictures of Jews all over the world. Peruvian Jew here in a prayer shawl. There's Ugandan Jews. And so again, this is like the best book in terms of showing the diversity of the Jewish people, which I think is so important. It's surprisingly like the most religious of all of them. If you're looking for just like a very explanatory text, a book that's really diverse, I would recommend this one. The next book is A Hat for Mrs. Goldman, a story about knitting and love. This is actually not a Hanukkah book, but it is a wintertime Jewish book. It's got some Yiddish in it about doing a mitzvah for someone else, which is doing like a good deed. And it's about a little girl. She notices that her neighbor is always knitting hats for other people, but loses her own hat, and no one has knit a hat for her. So this little girl decides to set out and make Mrs. Goldman a hat. Her kepi must be very cold. Her head must be very cold, frets Sophia. The hat doesn't turn out very well because knitting is really tough. And if you're a little kid knitting a hat, it's gonna come out pretty lumpy and holy, but she fixes it by making lots of pom-poms, which is what she's best at, and sticking the pom-poms all over the hat. And then there is a knitting pattern for the Sophia hat covered in pom-poms in the back. The next book is Moishe's Miracle, a Hanukkah story by Laura Kraus-Melmed, illustrated by David Slonim. This book is basically, I would call it a mashup of Fiddler on the Roof and Stregonona. So it's about this, basically Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof, right? So it's about this Moishe, who's a dairy cart puller guy, and he is too generous and his wife is too nagging. And this would be really my only qualm with the book, is like, I don't really love these really stereotypical gender roles portrayed here. And like, we already get that from Fiddler. So like, I don't know, kind of make your own character dynamics. And the wife is so nagging and so ungenerous and awful, kind of, that I don't love that about the book. But basically, Moishe gets this magic pan that will make unlimited latkes on its own, but only if he uses it. And he uses the pan to sort of feed the village, and they love that. But then his wife, who feels like, you know, you're too generous and we never have enough money for things, she tries to use the pan to open up a shop and charge for the latkes, and then it becomes cursed and all these little devils jump out of the frying pan and attack her. And so she learns her lesson. She ends up becoming like kind and sweet because she was like scared by the devils, I guess. If you really love Fiddler on the Roof and you kind of want to feel like have a cozy Fiddler Hanukkah, maybe you'll really love Moishe's Miracle. The next one is for families of Jewish kids who don't celebrate Christmas. So like, we're Jewish and we do Hanukkah and Christmas, but if your family is Jewish and you don't celebrate Christmas, like, this is maybe the book for you. So it's called Dear Santa, Love Rachel Rosenstein. It's by Amanda Peet and Andrea Troyer, illustrated by Christine Davenier. And the authors were Jewish and basically just like remembered growing up as kids and like wanting to do Christmas so bad, but their parents were very like, no, we don't celebrate Christmas at all. So it's about this little girl, Rachel Rosenstein, loved Christmas, but hers was like the only house without Christmas decorations. She makes her own Christmas decorations to decorate the house. She tries to visit Santa, but it all kind of backfires for her, and Santa doesn't come, and her family's mad at her for like cutting up their clothes to make the Christmas decorations. Then, like, she ends up having a really lovely Christmas day, going to a Chinese restaurant where she meets some of the other kids who don't celebrate Christmas, like Lucy, who celebrates Chinese New Year, and Amina, who celebrates Diwali. And so they kind of bond over that. And the ending is, Rachel realized when there were so many great holidays in the world, why feel so bad about one little old day like Christmas? And then there's this picture of her watching kids parade by with Christmas presents. And she says, well, maybe she could feel a tiny bit bad. And that's the end of the book. So it's just a book being really honest about, like, it's kind of rough being a Jewish kid in America or any like majority Christian nation at Christmas time. It is rough. It is just a book acknowledging that. And I think that for some families and for some kids, this might be really great. But I can also see how for some Jewish families, this book, even the extent to which it kind of acknowledges Santa as like a real entity that she can write to and talk to. I can see that making some Jewish families uncomfortable. So it may be for you, it may not be for you. I think it might be a really good one to read for Gentiles, for families who do celebrate Christmas, because like, just take a minute to think about and empathize with the kids who don't celebrate Christmas at this time of year when y'all shove it down our throats. So those are some of our favorite Hanukkah books, and I hope that everybody has a really happy Hanukkah and any other holidays this time of year you might celebrate. Please like this video, subscribe, comment if you liked these, if you're planning on getting any of these, if you've read these before, if you have other recommendations. I would love to hear your comments. And you're really helping me out by liking and subscribing to grow my channel. So thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.